Hi, welcome to My Favorite Mistake. I'm your host, Mark Graven. Our guest today is Kason Morris. He describes himself as a LifeWork revolutionary. He's the leader of the future of work and skills strategy in a life sciences company where he's a corporate executive. But he also specializes in helping people transforming careers and workplaces, the evolving or revolving landscape of work, career development, and leadership. So Kason has a master's degree from NYU. He studied in a multidisciplinary program that covered topics including business and workplace education and organizational behavior. So Kason, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me and talking about such an interesting topic like your favorite mistake. So really glad to be here.
Yeah, well, it's great to have you here. There's a lot to talk about, but we'll jump right in. From the different things you've done in your work and in your career, Kason, what's
Yep.
your favorite mistake?
I would say my favorite mistake, I would characterize it as the relentless climb. So it
Mm,
was that idea that, several years ago in my career that I believed that success was determined by how fast you could climb the corporate ladder.
mhm,
So I thought about more promotions, more money, more recognition, that these were the ultimate goals. And frankly, I was dead wrong. And
mm.
that relentless climb and that mindset almost broke me.
So there's a lot we could unpack there, and thank you for sharing that. When did you either discover or start thinking that you were either dead wrong or even a little wrong?
Around that time, I realized that I had many things happening outside of work. So the stakes were pretty high for me at that time. I had my second daughter on the way, so I felt that weight of responsibility. Coming from very humble beginnings, I didn't have any backup plan. So that climb was like, keep going further, keep driving, keep pushing. And I put pressure on myself to over deliver,
Mm,
constantly striving for that next promotion. And that came at the expense of my health, my well being, and some of my relationships. So it was at that marker where I realized I was creeping toward that idea of burnout. And I realized I started missing really important moments with my family, that my
mhm,
health was deteriorating, and I was feeling this emptiness inside, even though everything on paper looked
mm,
like it was going well.
mm. So could you tell us, maybe share some examples of the career path that you had? What were some of those promotions? What were some of those roles? It sounds like for a while you were living that dream. Like kind of paint the picture for us of what some of those roles were.
Yeah. So after college, I got into, after my master's degree program at NYU, I got into consulting, and working in professional services. And the beauty of working in consulting is you get a lot of diversity. You're able to access and solve really great client challenges, all kinds of client problems. You get to travel. You get to do all those things that most young professionals want to do,
Mhm.
and you learn a lot about business. So from that point, I spent quite a few years in the consulting space, and then I went into independently consulting on my own for a little while in the financial services realm. So I had the pleasure of having a journey of doing talent and org performance work in a variety of industries.
Mhm.
Starting with from the professional services lens, it allowed me to touch different industries, and then I focused in on financial services for a little while, and then after that, I went back into professional services in more of like a full time role. So doing, managing a team, building learning and development functions, and that was one of the places where I started realizing like, hey, I wanted to do more. I wanted to keep growing my span of control, if you will.
Mhm.
And these were the kinds of things that looked great on paper. I got a lot of experiences and a lot of exposure, but I didn't have a strong why. I didn't have a strong why for myself. And that's where the seam started to crack because I kept pushing, because pushing was all I knew how to do.
Hmm.
And I didn't think about how it was actually fueling what I wanted to achieve in my life holistically.
Yeah. Did you get feedback from your family about this? I'm thinking about, a previous guest who had a child old enough to call him out on that lack of balance, or, taking calls in the home office in the evening instead of spending time. Did you get feedback from anyone in your family, or was it sort of
Yeah,
your own self-reflection?
it was a bit of my own self-reflection when I realized I was missing dinners.
Hmm.
I spent a lot of time, instead of winding down with my partner and my kids at the time, I would, after dinner and after the kids going to bed, I would stay up and continue to work on projects to try to stay ahead of the curve. And then one of the actual telling moments was when one of my daughters mimicked, what she thought I was doing as like an employee. Like, hey, this is when Daddy goes to work, and she was like typing on the keyboard and on the phone and
Hmm.
doing all these different things that made me think like, wow, this is the image that she has of me. And that was definitely one of those markers of like, hey, I need to make a change, because if my daughter is role playing me, this is not how I see myself and how I want her to see me going forward. So how do I start making some shifts?
Yeah, it sounds like she was mimicking this multitasking, three things going on at once, executive schedule of one meeting to another, running late, juggling. She'd picked up on that, maybe.
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely. And around this time, this is like it became a real turning point for me, because I realized that like my talents and my sense of worth, it wasn't tied to my job titles.
Hmm.
That success shouldn't have been about sacrificing my health or my family, and that my growth as a person wasn't about climbing higher. It was about designing better. And seeing
Mm.
her behavior, I was like, hey, I have to design better, because that's not the image I want to leave with her.
Yeah. So that's an interesting phrase, designing. I was going to ask you about what steps you started taking to make adjustments, and it sounds like this designing your life phrase is part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Because of the types of experiences that I've had in my career, being able to work with different teams and different areas of work, like product management, marketing, IT, it led me to start to look at those different practices, and I started to think about my life in the context of like systems. So when
Mm.
you think of design thinking principles, particularly for like product management and systems design, I started thinking about like, well, why can't you apply that to how you actually live? And that's where the concept of life designing really
Mm.
came into shape for me, before it
Mhm.
became like this officially or formally known thing, because now it's actually a becoming a more popular concept. And
Yeah.
there are some known authors and folks from like Stanford who drive the practice. And really, when you think about growth in business, in life, and in general, it isn't really a net new idea. It's about how do you use old ideas in new ways.
Mhm.
And what I started to do was hook into the lessons I learned from business and those practices, and started applying it to coaching myself and coaching others, and coaching leaders that worked for me. And
Mhm.
that's where life design and the idea of life work became a concept for me and my practice as an entrepreneur and also as an executive leader.
Yeah. So did your own personal journey and reflections about helping yourself and wanting to help others, did that lead to some evolution into the types of roles you've had? Or I'm curious to learn more about the role that you have now. It sounds
Yep.
like kind of a position that maybe it's kind of an innovative title or role, something that you or another executive helped create.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. So let me back into like the concept of the whole life work piece and how it ties into the work that I'm doing today. So when I
Yeah.
had that turning point, and my favorite mistake, but turned out to be my biggest gift.
Mhm.
It like forced me to redesign how I thought about my life and my profession. So what I did was I then stopped chasing titles,
Mhm.
and I started building a system of what I call like work life synergy, where basically the work I was doing was fueling my growth, and it supported the life that I wanted to live, and the kinds of work that I wanted to do. So working in talent and org performance spaces, I touched a lot of different kinds of projects, and it was always about the mission of helping people do more in
Mhm.
the context of work, because the more skill they have, the more skills that people have, the more capable they are, the better they are at work. And that has a bottom line impact.
Mhm.
And so this is like putting on my previous consulting skills and all these different kinds of things. And from that point, I started making really strategic pivots into doing work that would help me understand learning development as a corporate function.
Mhm.
So I just grew into going from consulting to working on different types of learning development and leadership projects, to working with technology to help understand how is technology helping enable more workforce development and productivity at work, to
Mhm.
building entire learning development functions for large global companies who are really thinking about how does learning actually drive business outcomes. Like if we make our IT more efficient, if we make our sales team smarter, if we think about what are the jobs that we need to move forward. These were the kinds of things that were curiosity questions for me. And I used each one of my opportunities to give my organization value, but then
Mhm.
experiment with what I thought was actually going to happen in the future of talent development and leadership development. And
Mhm.
the last couple of cycles of my executive career have led me into this intersection now that we're at with artificial intelligence, and really the foundation of how work works today, because
Mhm.
we are in a revolution. We're in this age of intelligence, where technology is now becoming an enabler, a partner, and in some realms of work, a replacement to human capability. And that's why in the life sciences realm and in my current role, my focus is really around the future of work, and thinking about what are our skills and capabilities for this future, and how does that work as a currency to help humans thrive in the intelligence age and partner with technology for whatever is going to happen next.
Mhm. So I want to come back. We'll come back to that point around trying to anticipate what's happening or what's going to happen for any of us as professionals. What the future of technology and AI means for us. But I want to dig a little bit more into the way you had stated it, Case, on life work. Like
Yep.
we so often hear work life in
Yep.
that order, work life balance. And I
Yep.
want to get your thoughts. I've interviewed some other people, or I've read more about some people pushing back on the word balance, and they want to talk about work life integration. What you said in
Yep.
terms of synergy,
Yep.
life work synergy, sounds like it's along those lines. Tell us more about what some of those different words or phrases mean for you, and the impact that has on us in our careers.
Yeah, it's a great question, and a great topic to deconstruct. So I am one of those advocates that I feel like work life balance is a false dichotomy. It
Mhm.
sells you an idea that you really can't achieve.
Mm.
um, and I'll deconstruct it. First, for me, when I think about the word work life, what I immediately start to do in my own brand and in my own practices is I was like, hey, we have to switch that around, because work doesn't drive our life.
Mhm.
We should understand what our life goals, our life trajectories, our life principles, and then we figure out how does work actually empower that? How do we start to use work as a utility and a leverage to make sure that we're designing our best life?
Mhm.
So for me, that was the first part of the switch. And then thinking about balance. When you think of balance, you think of things. That's why I say it's a false dichotomy, because balance leads you to think about things as equal. And when you think about the ebbs and flows of life and what you do at work, nothing's ever really going to be equal. I think it's more about the idea of the concept I use and I talk about in my book is the idea of synergy. Because when you think about synergy, change is the only constant in our
Hmm.
lives and in the world today. So it's really more about how do you anticipate the ebbs and flows of where either life is going based on your priorities or where work is going. And one of the models I talk about in my book around life work synergy is this idea of trying to think about your planning in seasonality. Or if you're like a sports person, you could think of it like quarters in a year or in a game like basketball.
Hmm.
Basketball is one of my favorite sports. So one way to really drive that home is if you know what season you're heading toward, like, hey, you know what? This is going to be a really busy work season for me because I have a number of different projects on deck and I'm going to have to travel a lot. With that mindset, you can get ahead of it a little bit and start to plan different systems in your life, meaning with your wife and partner, with your children, with your family, so that way everyone is sort of aligned with the trajectory of what you have to prioritize, and then it ebbs and flows more successfully versus creating like constant resistance and tension in
Yeah.
your world. And most people don't look at things like that. They just kind of like drive into them or they crash into that wall and they don't understand why. So
Mm.
when you start to change that logic of it's not about achieving balance, it's about achieving alignment and thinking about that alignment in relation to like synergy as an ebbs and flows of what you have to do and what those priorities are, you wind up, being a lot more sustainable, a lot more successful, feeling a lot more whole because that way you know how to navigate what's coming forward.
Yeah. And I feel like I didn't make a mistake. I feel like I did. I feel bad not mentioning the book, but I didn't know about the book. It was not in your Podmatch profile. So congratulations on the book launch,
Thank you so much.
December 2024. Yeah.
Yep, it was something that I put to task for myself last year
Hmm.
because outside of my executive work, I also coach and I speak and run workshops and
Hmm.
programs. And I recognized the book was a way to scale these messages and these patterns
Hmm.
to help as many people as possible because I have the privilege of being at the forefront in industry as to being one of the leaders in shaping what's next. I think there is a huge opportunity for individuals to take their own sense of agency,
Hmm.
start to think about how do I navigate this future while these different corporates, try to figure out what's happening ahead. And that's really what was the catalyst for writing the book because I've helped hundreds of people at this point, and I've helped myself time and time again. And the book shares a number of the deeper dive frameworks, some stories from clients that I've worked with, and just the different patterns that are emerging that can help people go from surviving to thriving in this next normal.
Yeah. And the book is the title is it's just LifeWork Revolution: How to Unplug from the System, Find Your Purpose, and Thrive Beyond the 9 to 5. So I found it on Amazon. Amazon stubbornly was trying to redirect me to Jason Morris. So it took me a second. You got to tell Amazon, no, I meant Kason Morris. Stop redirecting me to Jason. But you can find it there on Amazon. I'll make sure there's a link in the show notes. Again, congratulations on that being available. Be a good thing to check out. Tell us a little bit about you mentioned it sounds like you have your entrepreneurial endeavors,
Yep.
independent practice. What was that part of your adjustment to life work synergy to also start doing that?
Definitely was. I've had as I mentioned at a previous point in my career, I had an independent practice. When I left the formal consulting world and started working in finance, I worked as an executive consultant. This was my second turn at having a longstanding consultancy, and one of the reasons was because I enjoy the diversity of the work, and
Mhm.
also helping people and businesses large and small. And so for me, it is a synergy. It's a bit of a yin yang, if you will, of being able to be a leader in corporate and drive larger initiatives at scale, while also providing and distilling access to that information and best practices to either individuals, small groups, or like startups,
Mhm.
and also partnering with nonprofits. So big thing for me is that practice actually came out of the greatest experiment that the world has ever known, which is COVID,
Mhm.
because COVID was another catalyst for how technology and how the world of work and how we're thinking about things, how it changed. Because around that time, so many people lost their sense of normalcy and again consistency. And if your fancy title and your previous degree didn't keep you secure during those kinds of moments. And I
Mhm.
had a number of colleagues, friends, folks in network, VP, C-suite, director level colleagues, really like looking for help, looking
Mhm.
for how do I wayfind, how do I navigate these unknown variables. And even around that time, I looked at myself and I didn't realize it then. Around that time, I was perfectly secure,
Mhm.
and I not only was I secure, I was doubling my bonuses and my net income from my corporate job. And I recognized like, hey, there's something here, and I have to figure out a way to give this back. Like I can't keep it to myself. And
Mhm.
that's what encouraged me to really double down on entrepreneurial pursuits in tandem with the work that I do as a corporate executive. And I'll make one other just point is as you
Mhm.
think about how we step into the future of work, not everyone's meant to go like on in an entrepreneurial route. But when you think about the way change is happening and the way talent has to move within the organizations now to get work done, those entrepreneurial skills are things that I would call like future ready, future proof kinds of
Mhm.
skills. They're
Mhm.
mindsets that will help you and will pay you back forever, whether you want to go outside of your work and do an independent, or if you want to internally like navigate and thrive in this next normal.
Mhm. Yeah. So let's dig a little bit more into what you're learning, what you're seeing, what you're anticipating when it comes to technology, and in particular AI. How
Yep.
how to navigate that. Hopefully, there's some things to be optimistic about, that AI can help us instead of just replacing us. What are your thoughts?
Absolutely. I think AI is definitely a big hot topic, a buzzword. So many different things happening, so many different tools becoming available to people. The way I try to characterize thinking about AI as an individual and as an employee, think about this as a persona. AI has been around for decades. It's always been around. We've always used it. You just didn't think about it. And now we're at a place where now sort of these AI models are more commercial grade and accessible to people, and now they're more available, and they're basically penetrating into other areas of work. And the way I would tell employees to think about it is think about these different tools as support functions. It's like having a bunch of really smart interns in your pocket.
Mhm.
And the goal is, you know, AI isn't going to replace most high skilled workers. It's the people that know how to use
Mhm.
artificial intelligence and emerging technologies to make decisions faster that are going to replace you.
Mhm. Yeah.
So when you think about the types of skills that you're building, the skills that keep you, future ready. And recently, I even posted about this on LinkedIn. The World Economic Forum released its 2025 Future Jobs Report,
Mhm.
and one of the things that was a huge call out is that a lot of the critical skills that most leaders and most owners of organizations are looking at are very human centered. It's about
Mhm.
analytical thinking, about creative thinking. It's about communication. Now, there's also a lens around AI, but it's more about AI literacy. And that goes back to my point around how well can you partner with these new technologies to make very human decisions that lead to results faster.
Yeah.
And that, to me, in my coaching, in my courses, in anything that I evangelize for, when I tell people to take agency in their own development and their own growth, that's the foundation and the underpinning of what I call are those durable skills that will pay you back forever and will continue to multiply as more technology becomes commonplace in how we work.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with the way you're sort of describing this or framing it as having, AI interns or interns. When I've used ChatGPT mainly, you do have to supervise it the way you would supervise a college intern, and to either double check their work or to ask questions of it to confirm what it's done, that it's based on the document that you gave it instead of, kind of, I don't know, hallucinating is, the term that they use. I've even used, like, for example, putting together, and I think this is a matter of like personal efficiency, of like taking a podcast transcript that's been done in an automated way. ChatGPT can clean that up. Like, a couple of AI tools I use, they're not learning how to spell my last name. They're always spelling it wrong. And so, there's some tools that I can use to clean that up, or, I'll even ask it, and it saves me the burden of having to take as many notes when I'm hosting here. I can focus more on listening and maybe thinking about what to ask next. I can ask, ChatGPT, pull out 5 or 7 quotes that would be compelling to share from the episode. And it'll do that. But then I've learned, like, are those really verbatim quotes from the guests? In the Chat GPT, said like, "Oh, I apologize. You're right. Let me." Like that. It was paraphrasing or something instead of giving the direct quote. So don't. Yeah, you got to check their work. And like a well-intended intern might have misunderstood the instruction. That's happened.
Absolutely.
That's happened to me.
Absolutely. And when you think about like certain skills like prompt engineering and those kinds of things, the more versed you become at how these different tools work, the better you get at using them, and the more you can trust these outputs. And think about it at an individual level, that's where I think the growth opportunity is. But even at the organizational level, as a strategist, this is what I help organizations look at and start to think about. It's like, how do we start to use these kinds of technologies to become more informed about our talent and become more informed about what the work actually is? So that's the thing that I think is really going to be that next stage, is really understanding how can we use technology to better understand what's the most critical task related to the work, and then what are the skills that are needed to execute those tasks, and then where do those skills live, amongst our talent. And the corporation should have that insight, but I encourage individuals to also have that insight and to be able to tell that story for themselves. Because the more you're able to tell that story, the more you're able to use your job as a way to experiment and going back to what I said earlier, thinking about it as a utility to experiment with these models and to make those mistakes and to fail fast and learn, then the better off you'll be.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Fail fast, learn, and stop repeating those mistakes. That's one of the core themes of this podcast.
Yep.
Yeah. What are some other mistakes, if you will, or things that people or companies are getting wrong about other aspects of the future of work? Return to office has been in the news a lot again recently. We didn't know, coming out of COVID, how much remote work would be a new normal versus a temporary thing. What would you have to say about that topic in particular?
Yeah, I would say cautiously, it's about like, it's not about right or wrong. I think there are some things that we have to think about. Like, even I'll start with the AI thing, and then I'll go back into like the return to office and some other pieces. From an AI perspective, Some people actually expected AI to proliferate faster than it has, and it hasn't, because certain systems have to change, certain things have to be true. You still, as you mentioned, you still need that human intervention, which is ever critical.
Hmm.
But it's still going to continue to move. So I think that was one thing that people didn't really have a strong prediction about it, but it's going a little bit slower than I think people anticipated, based
Hmm.
on the excitement of like ChatGPT and OpenAI and these other models that have come out.
Hmm.
Now, when you think about the human side of things, like the return to office mandate, there's lots of mixed opinions about that. And going back to my point around COVID, COVID was a worldwide experiment that proved a pretty interesting hypothesis. It was like, hey, people don't have to be in the office, and they can actually get work done, and they can get work done effectively at that. So now you have all these technologies and these other things that are helping people do that. You know, Now why is there a need to go back into the office?
Yeah.
There is some value in the office
Hmm.
for like teaming, for collaboration, for relationship building, and those are all important things. But I do touch the topic of return to office with the like very delicately, because I think it really is function to function, and you really have to think about, like, well, what does being in office actually mean? It's just a different form of working. Because if you are going to the office to get on a Zoom meeting, I would question that you could do that Zoom meeting right from the safety of your home. And when you think
Right.
about the cost benefits of the time saved from commuting, from gas, from clothing, from all the different things that people invest in to go into that cycle, this is why you're seeing a lot of pushback from like employees, because it's a testament to the quality of life, and
Hmm.
the fact that people are implicitly saying, you should trust me to do my job. I've shown you that I can do the work. My presence is not a determinant of whether or not the job gets executed.
Right.
So some organizations have a clear why around return to office, um, and those that do, if it's a part of the culture, and if it's a part of the ways of working, and it's a part of the outputs, I think they will be successful.
Hmm.
Whereas others, it's a little bit nebulous, and I think they're going to really have trouble. And what you're going to do is you're going to alienate top talent
Hmm.
because of that.
Right. Yeah. No, because I mean, if at some level people are feeling insulted that they're not, or disrespected that they're not being trusted or
Yep.
being given the right level of autonomy, yeah,
Yep.
that's going to be a big factor.
And
And
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, go ahead.
I was going to say another thing that I would say when I think about the future of work sort of trends is this idea of like employee experience. That's becoming a very big topic in, with the proliferation of technologies and applications, and not quite understanding, what are the priorities. It's really, really important for organizations to start to think about, how can I refine this experience? How can I create clarity for employees in what they need to do, what tools they need to use, and making those tools easy to use, so that people are actually spending more time executing on outcomes that matter, versus
Hmm.
like administrative stuff or paperwork, or trying to figure out digital ecosystems. That's another pretty big one that is top of mind for organizations in the near term.
Hmm. It's interesting you talk about this. You know, is the adoption or spread of AI going slower than expected? I heard an analyst talking on a podcast recently who was saying that there's the one question of the development of the models, going
Hmm.
from large language models to AGI, generalized intelligence. But those analysts are saying like, the bottleneck comes back to supply chains for the chips the newer AI chips actually designed specifically for AI and for the servers. And he's like, there's like a 10-year lead time in the semiconductor industry of getting these things not just designed, but built and ramped up. And the analyst was saying, in a way, it's good because it buys us time as humans to think through
Yeah.
all of these implications, where sometimes the technology moves way faster than we can even think through.
Yeah, and that's a very interesting call out. I don't remember the studies top of mind, but when you think about all the different revolutions that have happened, like from the Renaissance period to the industrial age, right? What's happening is that those revolutions had long tails, like technology
Mm-hmm.
innovation, things happened. People had a century to adjust, decades to adjust to the normalcy of them. And what's happened in the last 25 to 30 years with artificial intelligence and other emerging technologies is that access and the way it's moving is doubling on itself a lot faster than we as humans can actually tolerate
Yeah.
for our own sort of comfort levels. So the fact that literally it may slow down because we can't produce enough is a very, I think it is probably a blessing. So that people can start to normalize and process these different ideas, and then frankly, also so that systems, meaning work systems, like these big questions that we've been talking about, can
Mm-hmm.
start to change and think about like, well, what is the next normal for how work works? You even think about the idea or the concept of the digital employee, meaning like, right now we have agents that help us with our like consumer stuff and things that we do. The next step is to actually have a digital employee that's an AI
Mm-hmm.
that learns the culture, learns those normalcies and those kinds of things. And one of the big challenges is that all this technology is great, but it's only as good as how well you teach it and the ecosystem that it operates in.
Mm.
So these are all, I mean, at a personal level, that's something to think about. At an organizational level, that's another big thing to think about.
Mm-hmm.
Because garbage in, garbage out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So again, our guest today has been Kason Morris. Kason, one other just general topic to start to wrap up on. Thinking about organizations and culture, organizational behaviors you've studied and worked through and led. What are your thoughts on helping create a culture that best enables innovation and employee engagement? What are some of the key factors for leaders to think through or take action on?
Yeah, I think a lot of the topics we have touched base on definitely impact those kinds of cultures, the cultures that will allow people to thrive. What I try to drive is this idea that an employee in a great place to work can get hired once and can reinvent themselves over and over again because they have access to insights about what they need to do, what good looks like, and they have access to and insights to opportunities based on the work that is driving the business. So I would say, if I could anecdotally sort of broad stroke encourage leaders, is really stand on transparency. It's not about things being perfect. It's about building trust with employees and they understanding that they're on the journey with you versus being just a cog in your machine. And that way, that builds trust, that builds that what we call the employee value proposition. Because the more people have trust, the more people feel like they're valued, and to what we said earlier, that they can fail and not be punished. The more
Right.
loyalty you get, the more sustainability you get, the more
Mm-hmm.
productivity you get. And these are conversations that are few and far between, because a lot of leaders are just stuck on deliverables and outputs,
Yeah.
and not so much about thinking about the care of employee health and well-being and their access to their own information so that they can grow and develop accordingly within the ecosystem of the place of work.
Mm-hmm. Well, so a lot of great food for thought here, Kason. Thank you for sharing, some of your story, your life and work, and the things that you've figured out, and I love the way you said it earlier that it was your favorite mistake because it turned out to be your biggest gift.
Yeah. No, I
Thank
mean,
you.
absolutely. I really appreciate the opportunity to share my story, and I encourage all of your listeners to, like, think about their own lives in that context. Like, are they climbing without direction? Are you sacrificing too much?
Mhm.
And then what would your life look like if you designed it in this context instead of letting it happen to you? Because that favorite mistake, it taught me the value of slowing down, reflecting, and designing a life that works for me. And I wouldn't trade that lesson for anything.
Yeah. Well, that's great. So, everyone, please do check out Kason's new book, LifeWork Revolution: How to Unplug from the System, Find Your Purpose, and Thrive Beyond the 9 to 5. So, look in the show notes for a link to Kason's LinkedIn page. And he's inviting people to follow or connect with him there. And maybe, a final thing to ask you: what you in your coaching practice, who are the people that reach out to you about that help? How can they learn more?
Yeah, I am actually working on a product that I'll be releasing this quarter, again, to scale the message. I also have my own personal website, so kasonmorris.com. That's another
Mm-hmm.
way to engage me and learn a little bit more. I do one-on-one, small group. Really depends. I try to customize these experiences because everybody's a one of one.
Mm-hmm.
But with that being said, I'm thinking about releasing more products where people can be a bit more self-directed and build more, and we're building more community around that. But
Mm-hmm.
anyone can reach out to me through my channels and learn more and get early access to some of these solutions. But it's all around this idea of how do you future proof, and what's that blueprint for future proofing for yourself.
Mm-hmm. Well, good. Well, I'll look forward to seeing those, and encourage people to go check that out. So again, Kason Morris, thank you so much for being a guest today. This has been a great conversation. Thanks.
Great. Thank you for having me.
Of course.